Hello guys. This is Recaps Now here. Today we are going to explain the movie Castaway. It is a survivor movie and deals with the many incidents that occur in the life of a man named Chuck Noland. The film is based on a true story. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. In the introductory scene, we see that Chuck is stranded on a small island in the sea owing to a plane crash. And after spending 4 long years in that island, he is finally able to reach the shores and returns safely to his family. As the movie commences, we see Chuck, who used to work at FedEx and held a high designation there. As he was a top official of the company, so he had to frequently visit different parts of the globe for official meetings and tours. As the movie progresses, we see that Chuck was in a long-term relationship with a girl named Kelly. They were very much in love and were about to get married. But Chuck was so engrossed in his work that the pair had not managed the time to get married. We then see that it is Christmas, but Chuck could not be there for the celebrations as he has to leave for Malaysia on an official assignment, but promises to be back by New Year's. After this, we see the pair exchange Christmas gifts. Kelly presents Chuck with a beautiful watch that belonged to her grandfather and had a beautiful picture of a smiling Kelly. Chuck really liked the gift that Kelly gave him. After this, we see that Chuck leaving for Malaysia. Now it happened that when Chuck's aircraft was flying across the Pacific, it meets with a deadly storm. And due to its severity, the plane crashes into the sea. As it was a private jet owned by the FedEx company, so the only passengers were the 3 pilots and Chuck. But after the crash, we see that only Chuck had survived the crash. After falling into the sea, Chuck somehow managed to hang on to a lifeboat and reaches an island. We also see some courier packs that came floating along with Chuck. Chuck keeps those couriers with great care. After roaming around the island, we see that Chuck realizes that he was the only living soul in the whole island, which meant he was stranded all alone in the island. Now we see that he writes help in bold and block letters so that the rescue team could locate him easily. After this, we are shown that Chuck waits there patiently and falls asleep. The scene then shifts, and it's already next morning. In the morning, when he visits that place, he finds that almost half of the word help had been wiped off. But nobody had come in search of him. After this, he writes help with the aid of a tree trunk. Chuck had been in that island for almost a day and a half, but he was hungry, as he had not had anything to eat. Just then, he saw a few green coconuts and was able to have some coconut water after a lot of struggles. After this, we see Chuck explore the island and finds the dead body of one of his companions, who was one of the pilots on board of that flight. He then buries the dead body there. While burying, he finds a torch with the pilot, which he keeps to himself. In this way, some days had passed and Chuck was still all alone in this island. Suddenly one night, he observes the light from a ship in the sea. After this, he tries to catch their attention by pointing his torch towards them. But as his torch was extremely small, so the people in the ship did not notice it. Then Chuck realizes that he cannot keep waiting like this, and the next morning tries to escape from there by rowing a boat. But both he and his lifeboat are engulfed by giant waves. After this, we see that Chuck gets injured by the giant rocks under the water. But he somehow gets to his island. Moreover, Chuck felt weak because he had not eaten anything for 4 days. The next morning, we see him checking courier boxes, but he did not find anything edible. Here we see a courier with a star mark which he does not open and keeps it in the hope that if he is someday freed from here, he would deliver that courier. This courier had now become his reason of survival. The only useful thing he finds from those boxes is an ice skating shoe. He uses that to break the green coconuts and enjoy the water. As time passes, he starts catching fish. Initially, the only fish he could capture were crabs. But the problem that he was facing was that crabs needed to be grilled or cooked in order for him to eat them. So then had to arrange for fires, which he tried by squeezing to pieces of wood. But that does not work. Rather, in the process, he cuts his palms, and we see Chuck getting frustrated. However, after a while, we see how he again tries to lit the fire, and after a few tries, he is successful in generating a fire which could be used for cooking. After this, he finds the football, which had his blood-stained fingerprints, and draws a face in its cover. As the name inscribed on the football was Wilson, so he names it Wilson. Then we see how Chuck shares all his feelings with his friend Wilson. This was Chuck's way of getting rid of his loneliness. Thus he had started to enjoy his new life, as now he had fire with him, so he could easily prepare fishes and eat it. After a few days, we see that Chuck starts to feel great discomfort in his teeth. One such day, we see that he feels such extreme pain that he uses his ice skating shoes and its spikes to remove the tooth, but in the process becomes unconscious. The scene then shifts to 4 years later, and we see that Chuck is still in that island, and now he is a pro in fishing. He has now learnt the skill of catching a fish from afar by throwing a stick, and now he is also habituated to eating them raw. In the last 4 years, his health has deteriorated and he was extremely weak and unrecognizable. His days were passing in a monotonous manner. Suddenly one day we see Chuck finds a tin-like material out of which he builds a building-shaped structure and sits in front of it. But soon it falls due to the wind. Seeing this, Chuck gets an idea. The idea was build a raft using the logs of tree and its bark. In a few months his raft is ready, which he uses to escape from there, and after 4 long years he felt free. In this journey, Chuck has his friend, Wilson the football, by his side, and he wanders around the sea for a few days. All this while he ate sea fishes and reserved the rainwater for hydration purposes. After a few days we see Wilson falls from the raft, and when Chuck notices it, it's too late. Chuck tries his best to search and bring back Wilson, but fails and feels extremely sad and shattered about it. After another few days we see that Chuck is found by a cargo and is rescued by them. Then we are shown that Chuck has returned to his house after many years to find that everything had changed and his friends and relatives had already performed his funeral, assuming him to be dead. Moreover, he comes to know that even Kelly was now married with a kid. This devastates Chuck, because Kelly was the love of his life, and the only thought that kept him alive in the island was that of Kelly. But Kelly was also helpless, as she thought that Chuck had perished in the mishap. After this, we see a meeting between Chuck and Kelly where they talk to each other, and Chuck returns Kelly the watch that she had gifted him on their last meeting before Chuck left for Malaysia, as the watch belonged to Kelly's granddad, and Chuck wanted it to remain with her family. We then see a very emotional moment between Chuck and Kelly when Chuck is about to leave her house, where she runs to Chuck and hugs him and says how she always believed that he was alive, but she had to marry someone else due to her family pressure, and how she still loved only him. Then we see Kelly board Chuck's car, and it looks like they would elope, but Chuck makes her understand the situation and drops her home. In the next scene, we see that the next morning Chuck is seen resuming his job, and he was going to deliver the courier he had saved from years ago when he was stuck in the island. On reaching the designated address, he finds nobody lived there, and he leaves the courier along with the message that this courier saved my life, thanks. On his way back he loses his way and was looking at his map for directions, when a girl passing by informs him of the directions and then guides him and drives towards the route from where Chuck was returning. We are then shown that the girl's car had the same symbol which was inscribed on that courier, and Chuck begins to smile thinking of the coincidence as the girl drives away. And this is how the movie ends. Thank you for watching.